Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Gerber. I'm the editor of the Times Free Press, and I'm here with Lon Cartwright. Mr. Cartwright, thank you for joining us.
You're
If,
welcome, Allison.
if you want to just open up by telling us a little bit about yourself and what qualifies you to take on this role and what your highest priority would be if you're elected mayor of Chattanooga.
Well, I'm 69 years old, and in the past, I worked as a professional counselor. I was on the crisis response team, handling homicide, suicide, child abuse. So my feet have touched the flames, if you know what I mean. I'm definitely not afraid of uh, conflict, frustration, and pressure. So, and I'm good with people. I don't have any past political background, but in a way, that's I think is a good thing because I'm not constrained by uh, being obligated to any groups. I'm my own man. I can think outside the box and be more creative as far as the government is concerned.
Thank you. We're going to start by talking about the city budget. The city's estimated to lose about 8 million in revenue, which is mostly due to the COVID-19 pandemic and its effects. And this is for the 2021 fiscal year. So as mayor, how would you balance a difficult budget in the 2022 fiscal year, which will also likely be impacted by the stress of the COVID pandemic?
Well, I think that the budget as it is, it really isn't a balanced budget. Well, and why I say that is I think one size doesn't necessarily fit all. I think that taxes, fees, and fines should be based on a person's income. You know, it's just like, well, I've read many books. The Bible is one of my favorite books, and one of my favorite scriptures I've read is, "To whom much is given, much will be required." So I think people that are making $300,000 or more a year, they ought to pay a little bit more in taxes. They ought to pay a little bit more in fines and fees. They can afford it. Someone who's just making like $800 a month, they shouldn't be held to the same standard. Their tax should be lower, their fines, their fees should be lower. Um, and so that's what I'm all about equity. That's what I'm looking for, equity in government. Yeah, and equity that's probably the number one issue for me. And then after that would be um, mandatory mask wearing with fines. I mean, in Tennessee, if you don't wear a seatbelt, you get a $10 or $20 fine. Not so with people not wearing a mask. I see 10% of people going into supermarkets and service stations refusing to wear a mask. They'll have one on when they get in, and then after they're in, they take it off. You know, it only takes one person that has COVID to infect an entire store, get people sick, and kill people. It's the only crime I know of where you can get away with murder, and the authorities are allowing it to happen. It's very sad.
So also continue the conversation about COVID. It's been almost a year since the virus was first detected in Chattanooga, and businesses and individuals, residents in the city, are struggling because of it. How would you provide aid to businesses and families who've been hit hardest by the economic impact of the virus? And are there any programs currently in place that you would keep? And are there other programs that you might consider adding?
Well, back to whom much is given, much will be required. I think that especially in a period like this when we've got like three crises going on, that those who have more should step up to the plate and even be willing to contribute to the government to help the government along. Um, I definitely would not want to defund police. I think police is a good thing, but I think for nonviolent crimes, we maybe need to have a crisis response team to address those type of problems rather than the police. Uh,
Thank,
but I want to boost the economy, and I definitely wouldn't want to cut any programs. From what I've seen, all the programs looks like they're very good, including the early childhood education. I would want to continue with that.
Thanks for that answer. Paving and transportation consistently rank at the top of citizens' concerns according to annual studies done by the city. So what transportation and infrastructure goals would you have should you be elected?
Well, for one thing, there needs to be more routes for CARTA services. For many residents in Chattanooga, they're actually closer to stores in Red Bank than what they are in several parts of Chattanooga, yet there's no buses that go to Red Bank. So I would definitely be looking at adding more transportation, pushing that along. Um, and transport, that's, yeah, that's the main thing I would think I would be looking at as far as transportation would be concerned, is adding the more of the buses. And I'm glad to see that the city's getting away from requiring the emissions control testing, because that was very hard on the poor in our community. Yeah. So, but that being said, I am big on environmental conservation. I would want to continue recycling and that sort of thing.
Thank you. So moving on to some questions about businesses and the economy. City labor unions and many activists support a $15 minimum wage for city employees, which Mayor Burke had intended to begin implementing before the COVID pandemic. Do you support this or any other specific pay increase plans for employees, and why or why not?
Well, I would support it, but we'd have to, again, look at the budget and see where our money is coming from. And also being realistic, the preferred scenario would be, yeah, everybody could get $15 an hour, even if they're pushing a broom. But the reality is that we are in a pandemic and there are a lot of expenses. And more importantly, I have a county mayor I'll have to deal with, a governor of a different party I'll have to deal with. And their values and their beliefs aren't exactly on the same page as mine. So it's going to be a balancing act, and not one I shy away from. But I think somewhere we'll have to meet in the middle and try to get things done for the people of Chattanooga. Yeah, and more about transportation. I would like to see some of the streets paved, fill up those potholes. I've seen sidewalks cracked and broken. Friend of mine fell down on a sidewalk and was knocked unconscious for several minutes.
Oh no.
Luckily, she did not have broken bones. She got scratches, she got bruises. But this goes on all the time, especially in the poorer communities and where a senior, I'm not sure why this is, but if you go just about anywhere in town, at any apartment complexes for seniors, it's been my experience, you'll see a lot of broken sidewalk.
So
So
in
I definitely want to get those fixed.
okay, thanks.
And also more signs. We have high incidences of traffic accidents in different sections of the town. And I think more signs need to be there.
So in Chattanooga, about 40% of households are housing cost burdened, meaning that they pay more than 30% of their income in rent and may therefore struggle to afford other necessities. How would you address affordable housing as mayor?
Well, um, I would have to look at the research and definitely reach across the aisles and uh, find out more about what my predecessor did. And but I would be pushing for more affordable housing. I mean, it's ridiculous. Some people out in Chattanooga are paying like $700, $800 for a sleeping room. That is ridiculous. So, I mean, that would be a top priority for me is to work on affordable housing in Chattanooga.
Also, sort of related to that, a lot of Chattanoogans are experiencing homelessness. And how would you further the city's progress toward reducing homelessness? How would you tackle that issue?
Well, I think I would definitely be working on that. That's a tough issue. That's a tough issue. I think a lot of the homeless, not saying all of them, but a lot of them are mentally ill. A lot of them has substance abuse issues, and that may be a lot of why they're homeless. You know, um, so we would have to look at that. And I think as a community, those who are in power and have money should, would want to help these people. I mean, we have food pantries, and I'm sure some of them are, but I would like to see more of that happen. Yeah, and I would definitely be doing all I could to help the situation with policy and uh, talking with others and putting literature and uh, other things out there to try to help the problem.
Downtown Chattanooga was once a showcase. Other cities would come here to study how the city had managed to revitalize that commercial district. However, now it is struggling to hold on to businesses. There are a lot of vacant facilities down there. How can that be improved? And what factors do you think have made Chattanooga less appealing to businesses? And also, if you wouldn't mind discussing how the business improvement district fits into that, and whether that's something that you favor.
Well, for the vacant buildings and vacant businesses, uh, I would like to see some renovation done and maybe bring them back up some way. Uh, and yeah, I think the neighborhood associations and different associations are doing their best, and they need all the help they can get from the city government and the county government and also state government. So I would be working in liaisons with all three and possibly the federal government to try to turn the situation around. And
Do you
where
see
they couldn't be saved, maybe some of the buildings, if they're very bad condition, they may have to be brought down and a new building put in its place.
do you support the business improvement district?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I think that's a good thing. And
Moving on.
yeah, we need to reach across to other businesses, some that aren't in Chattanooga, and hopefully try to get some of them to move here to invest in our community, and so we would have more jobs.
So moving on to public safety, last fall shootings in Chattanooga were up 20% from the same time in 2019 and higher than any time in the last 5 years. So as mayor, how would you work to lower violent crime rates in the city?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with people don't know how to control their anger. And so I would be pushing for an anger management and sensitivity training required uh, by our first responders, the police, the EMTs, the fire department, have that in place for high school students and middle school students, and make sure that those with felonies and who have had criminal problems, that they would take such a thing. You know, we've gotten away from being civil toward one another, and I'd like to bring that back. And I think that has a lot to do with the high crime, because people don't stop and think about the consequences where they do something. That has a lot to do with it. Now, I've heard it said, well, they're doing these crimes because, well, they're poor, you know, but I don't know. Maybe some of that might be true, but I think a large part of it is that there is a criminal mind out there. There's definitely some evil people, and we have to have uh, jails and policy in place to deal with such people. It's unfortunate, very unfortunate.
Activists spent the summer in Chattanooga and across the country protesting police brutality and demanding defunding or divesting from the police. Would you consider either of those options for the Chattanooga Police Department or any other reforms? And if so, like in what ways, what types of reforms would you consider for law enforcement locally?
Well, I would never defund the police, never. We have to have a strong police force. That being said, I see no reason why a crisis response team or a social worker response team couldn't handle nonviolent crimes. I don't know why we have to send uh, uh, people out there, police out there to deal with that. I'm looking at George Floyd, you know, more than likely a social worker could have handled that. And that man would be alive today. And, but I think too, the police need to, some of them, I would require that all police had a anger management and sensitivity training. The, the blacks and different races, they do have their own culture. They, you know, and we got to be able to recognize that culture, to know that culture, and to be able to work with that culture.
So many of the activists and some candidates for elected office in the city have called for the removal of current high-ranking officers, including Police Chief David Roddy. What, if any, changes in the Chattanooga Police Department leadership would you implement if you're elected?
Well, I would have to look more closer to that. Um, Again, I think that we need to enforce a mask mandate. I think that's really important. Uh, but yeah, I would have to do more research on that.
Okay. Many have questioned the conduct of activists, citing incidents of vandalism, disruption to businesses, and confrontations with police. This is going back to the protests over the summer. And others, on the other hand, have criticized law enforcement and how they handled those protests for restricting access to public areas, for surveillance of activists on private property, and the nature of some arrests. So if similar unrest happened during your term as mayor, how would you weigh the restrictions for activists and also for a police presence? And what would you have done differently from what was done this past summer?
Well, I think that there's always going to be a group of people that are supposedly on the side of activism that really aren't. They're out there to burn buildings, break windows, and hurt people. Now, I've been in marches, I've been an activist myself, but never once would I ever think about breaking a window or stealing anything. These people that are doing that, they're not activists, they're criminals, and they need to be treated as such. For the people who are peaceful and they want to be activists, to march and so forth, that's a good thing. That's what our country is founded on. But not rioting.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to a couple of other issues. Have you received a COVID-19 vaccine? And if not, will you receive one when it's available?
Absolutely. I'll be the first in line for one if I can get it. I'm anxiously waiting getting it.
And do you believe transparency will be important in the mayor's office? And if so, how will you ensure that that is something that continues throughout your term? Also related to that, will you grant interviews with reporters and answer their questions on a regular basis?
Yes, I think transparency is very important. In fact, I would be pushing for uh, meet your city officials night once every 3 months or something like that, so that um, Chattanooga's could come and talk to any department head uh, about anything that is affecting them from services of that department, like the water department or the police department or whatever. They could talk to the mayor there and voice their issues one-on-one. This would be one-on-one. We'd have different tables set up, and people would just, they would sign up and they could come in and they could ask questions, they could tell about their problem, meet the official that is concerning that, uh, the issue they're having. Yeah, total transparency, total transparency. I wouldn't even be against a volunteer like police oversight commission or something like that even.
What do you think the relationship between the mayor and city council should look like? And if elected, would you cultivate relationships with council members?
Well, I would look forward to being in liaisons with the council members. I would listen to them, and I would hope they listen to me, and we would bounce off one another and come up with the best policy for Chattanooga that we can.
Okay, and one last question. Would you support public money for a new Chattanooga Lookouts Stadium should that request be made in the future?
Well, we'd have to look at the budget, what's available, you know. So I would have to deal with that once we came to it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else that you want to add or mention before we wrap up?
Well, yes, I I would like to see fast foods in downtown Chattanooga. I'd like to see service stations in and near downtown Chattanooga. Uh, Downtown Chattanooga right now, there's some very good restaurants down there. I'm not knocking them, but often a downtown is a microcosm of the larger city. And what I see right now is that downtown is skewed toward the wealthy and the well-to-do. Now we have a lot of senior citizens and low income people that live in downtown Chattanooga and near downtown, and they go down there and they can't afford to eat. They can't. They can't afford some of these restaurants down there. And also we have tourists that comes to downtown Chattanooga, and they come here. They come here from a different part of the state or out of the state. They don't want to spend $50 or more to feed their family just for lunch. And um, also, um, again, I think we need to fix our sidewalks, and a lot of the traffic lights need to be recalibrated. Uh, I've seen some walk signals stay on for like 3 seconds. I challenge anybody to walk across wide streets in 3 seconds. Okay.
Okay, well, listen, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And we thank you very much for answering all of our questions.
Oh, you're welcome, Allison. And I hope people will vote for me. I hope to get some donations. I'm up against some heavy hitters, some rich people, and I could use the help. So anybody want to volunteer for my campaign to help out, to give donations, I would very much appreciate it.